Today, in our story, a room that shouldn't have been there, a story that will change your perception of reality. This is a story you won't soon forget. Today, you'll hear a tale that will change your perception of reality. Don't forget to like if you're ready to dive into the darkest corners of the unknown. Subscribe so you don't miss the most terrifying stories. And leave a comment if you're ready to learn what hides in this house. Are you ready to discover the truth? When old houses are torn down, sometimes bones are found. Sometimes strange documents. But once, something was found that defies explanation. When old houses are torn down, sometimes bones are found. Sometimes strange documents. But once, something was found that defies explanation. It was a room that shouldn't have been there. It all started in the small town of Winterhall, where an old 5-story building stood, worn down by time, ready to collapse. It was built in the 60s and had long been considered hazardous. The workers finally began tearing it down, floor by floor. But on the 3rd floor, something happened that was never supposed to. One of the workers, Tom, struck the wall between 2 apartments with a sledgehammer. But instead of breaking the usual brick, he suddenly felt something give way behind the wall. He crawled into the newly formed gap and, pushing something aside, found a hidden room. The moment he stepped inside, he felt a strange chill running down his spine. The room was dark and damp, and the air was filled with a strange silence, like it had been locked away for years, untouched. There was something unsettling about the emptiness of the space. No furniture, nothing to mark its purpose, only a single old chair placed in the far corner, facing the wall. The chair seemed to have been waiting for someone, as though its occupant had just gotten up and left in a hurry. The most disturbing part, however, was the object on the floor. It was a cassette, with a note scrawled hastily in pen. "Do not play if you don't want to see the truth." Tom, despite the ominous warning, picked up the cassette, his hands trembling. What could it possibly mean? What truth was it talking about? The feeling in the room was heavy, oppressive, as though the walls themselves were pressing in, suffocating him. But when Tom showed the cassette to the architect, the man went pale. He said that this room shouldn't have been there. It wasn't in the original building plans. The next day, when they returned to investigate, the room was gone. The wall, where the hidden room had stood, was completely intact once again, as if nothing had ever happened. The workers thought it was some strange mistake. They assumed maybe the house was just decaying and warping, playing tricks on their minds. But the cassette remained. The story might have ended there, but it didn't. The cassette was eventually given to Arthur, an archive expert who had worked with the building's records for years. After examining the tape, Arthur decided to listen to it. He hooked it up to an old tape recorder, and as he pressed play, a strange static filled the room. Then, there were distorted noises, clicks, and strange murmurs, as though the cassette had been used for something much darker. Suddenly, the static cleared, and a voice emerged. It was a woman's voice, trembling with fear, as though it were coming from the brink of death. "If you're hearing this, you're already inside," the voice whispered. "This room only appears before those who are meant to disappear. You have 3 days." The message was chilling, and Arthur could feel his heart race. He quickly stopped the tape, but the room was eerily silent once again. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. 2 days later, Arthur died suddenly, his heart failing from a heart attack. No one could explain it. His body was found in his office, just as he had been listening to the tape, staring blankly at the recorder. The cassette was missing, as though it had never existed at all. Since then, rumors began to spread. People said that if you found a room like that one, a room that shouldn't have been there, if you saw something strange or supernatural that defied all logic, you were already marked. If you heard that voice, whether from a mirror or a tape recorder, There was no escaping it. You were already on the list, and you had 3 days before whatever was coming after you would make its move. And worst of all, if you found this room, it had already chosen you. Thomas couldn't shake the thought of that room. Every night, he dreamt of dark images, walls that seemed to eat the space around them, the twisted face of the conductor, and most of all, that unsettling, unforgettable gaze. He started obsessively searching for answers. He scoured old newspaper articles, books about the building, and even spoke to former residents of the house, but no one had any answers. Strangely, every record, every article about the house, about the third floor, had been destroyed. Even the archives seemed to have vanished, as though they had never existed in the first place. With each passing day, Thomas felt a growing sense of paranoia. He couldn't escape the feeling that something was watching him, that he was being followed, though there was no one there. It was as if the walls had eyes, and they were always lurking just out of sight, waiting for him to slip up. On the 5th day, he couldn't take it anymore. He returned to the building. This time, he entered without permission. He had to know the truth. The walls of the building were crumbling, the floors covered in dust and rubble. But as he made his way to the spot where the room had once stood, he saw something odd. There was a faint trail, as if someone had carefully moved through the walls, leaving a trace. It was light, almost imperceptible, but it was there. He followed the trail, the cold air biting at his skin. The smell of decay and metal filled the air, like the stench of a forgotten basement. He walked over broken floorboards, through piles of debris, and soon, he found himself standing before the space where the room had vanished. It was empty. It looked like nothing had ever been there. But then he felt something shift. The air around him grew thicker, heavier, and his breath quickened. Suddenly, a shadow loomed before him. He turned, and there it was again, the face. The conductor, the man who had been there in the train. His features were blurred, twisted, as though his body didn't belong to this world. "You won't leave here," the conductor whispered, his voice cold as ice. "You're already inside." Before Thomas could respond, he heard it. A bell, soft, distant, but unmistakable. It was the same bell from the train. He realized, with growing horror, that the train hadn't just passed through the house. It had been a part of it. Thomas understood then. He had become part of something far bigger, something far more dangerous than just a room. He had become part of a trap set by something ancient and relentless. The train, arriving at 3:13, had led him here, and it had led others before him, the people who disappeared. And Thomas was next. That night, at exactly 3:13, the bell rang again. Thomas would return. This time, he would uncover the full truth of the train, the room, and the curse that had already marked him. Would he survive? Or would he, too, become part of the story that no one could escape?